everyone. Very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining this BCS Agile Method Specialist Group event, August event. We haven't done one for a little while, actually, just to some other activity we've been focused on. So it's great to be back doing one of these with you all, and we were really pleased to see so many of you showing great interest in this session. I'm sure it's going to be an excellent conversation. We've got something really good lined up for you. And Jeremy, I'm pretty confident that this, what I suspect, will resonate with many of you as I hand over to our speaker in a sec. But yeah, just to thank you for coming. Very warm welcome. Just the usual simple formalities, etc. We have a really simple code of conduct. You can read the more detailed versions on our website. I typically just ask everyone to be respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a great experience. So yeah, let's just create a good vibe, as it was. I'm not going to get into any vibe coding conversations tonight or anything of that nature. But yeah, we like to create a good experience. And we want everyone to take something valuable from the session and have a great learning experience together. That's why we're all here today. So if you could all remember that, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to hand over to Jeremy in a second. He's going to do a bit of a context setting, and then he's going to work through some themes of his book, which is really what brings us here. So Jeremy reached out. We've had a couple of really insightful conversations. He's a advisory consultant, active in digital, agile, AI, all the good stuff. He's got extensive experience of various digital transformations, and really, I think through that journey and those learnings, he's clearly seen a lot of stuff, because I've read the book, and he's very nicely put it all together through a fictional narrative. I won't say too much more because I'd be stealing his thunder. But I've really enjoyed it, and what Jeremy's going to do for us as part of this session is he's going to work through 5 of the themes. There's a lot more than that in the book. I think he's picked, five really good topics. And as he goes through each of them, we're keen to stop, take a bit of a pause, and give you all the opportunity to share some thoughts, some reflections. Maybe you've got some experience of it. Maybe you can build on some of the conversations. So feel free to do that. If you want to drop some stuff in the chat that comes up along the way, or a question that you want to kind of throw out for the group, then do so. If you could preface it with a Q, that makes it easier for me and the team to spot it. And then, we'll see how we go. We've got plenty of time, and we'll have a bit more of a general Q&A at the end. So that's the plan. For those of you who don't know me, I forgot to introduce myself. See, I've got to state these things. I'm Sath Palsing. Everyone calls me Sath, and I'm chair of BCS Agile Methods. Quite light with the team support this evening. So Sohair's here somewhere. I think she's off Karma just now, so she can't give you a wave. So that's your team for this evening, myself and Sohair will be facilitating and hosting this session for you. So we're looking forward to it. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy and welcome into this session. So Jeremy, thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you here, and looking forward to your session. So over to yourself.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So I'll put the slides up. Hopefully that looks okay from your perspective, Sath and everybody else. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Right, thank you. So, yeah, first of all, reiterating what Sath has said, really, thank you so much for joining, because I appreciate this is everybody's evening now I'm eating into. So I hope it'll be worth your time. The bulk of the material we'll actually get through quite quickly. What I think we'll want to leave time for is the discussion, because my experiences are one thing. I've been through this a few times. Sath has a different set of experiences. Everyone else on this call will have more experiences still. And I think we can probably enrich our collective view of these and other themes by having a little bit of a discussion after each theme from the book has been touched on. So that's the way I'd like to do it. So it's maybe more interactive than normal, but it's in a very good cause. I think we'll get a lot out of it, hopefully, all of us. I have no idea what all your backgrounds are. I won't invite everyone to introduce themselves first, because we'd be here at 7:30, I think, and we wouldn't have seen any of the slides yet. But maybe if you come in with a question, maybe you can do that at that point if the context is relevant. So without further ado, let me move on. First of all, the title here, the title slide is Square Peg Round Hole. I came up with this when I worked for my last employer, Mason Advisory, because I observed that time and time again we're seeing good agile practice, let's say a square thing, good agile practice, being sort of forced into the circle that is the organizational protocol. And it just doesn't work. In so many ways, it just doesn't work. And that's kind of what the book explores. That's what we'll get into here in some aspects. So today's session, I'd like it to be informal. It's mostly me talking, but please come in when you need to come in, and please stack up those questions in the chat and we'll get into them. I'm sure I'll learn quite a lot, so it'll be instructive, I hope, for most people. If you think you've heard it all before, maybe you have, but I think what I'll be trying to talk about here is, even if you know all this stuff, how do you go about influencing other people to make improvements, to make Agile really sing within an organization? Because there are certain ways of expressing problems that work with executive staff, for example, and others that don't. So hopefully it'll be empowering as well, this session, because it might get us into discussions about, well, we all know that's true, but how do we get other people to understand that as well? But I'm taking it as read that a lot of you are Agile experts already. So I can see David nodding. It's great. If anybody else wants to come on camera, that's great for me. If nobody else wants to, then that's fine. I understand. So first of all, just introducing myself, I guess, in a way that hopefully you will empathize with. I love Agile. I discovered it only about, I guess it was about 12 or 13 years ago, something like that, which is comparatively recent in Agile terms. And I love it just because it actually makes so much common sense. To me, it's incredibly sensible when it's done right. And actually, I read a few books early in my time in Agile, which pointed out that Agile is what people did anyway before waterfall. And I don't know if that's really widely understood. In the early days of IT, before my time, before most of your time as well, if there was a problem, if something needed to change in an IT system, we didn't necessarily start a project. We got a bunch of people together with diverse backgrounds who could contribute to the problem or the opportunity, put them physically together in a room, let them talk through things, design things on whiteboards, and try something. And if it didn't work, try something else. So it's human nature, I believe, in a way that waterfall just isn't. So I love it for that reason. I love it because it provides value quicker, it's efficient, it's elegant to me. Plenty of people would say waterfall is elegant as well, and I guess it is in its own way, but it doesn't appeal to me in quite the same way. And this point at the bottom as well. So when I've seen Agile teams working really well, time and time again, they're so happy. The individuals in those teams are happy in a way that waterfall project members never are. I see happy project managers occasionally when everything's going swimmingly. I don't see a lot of people picking up tasks in projects delighted by what they're doing. I just haven't observed that myself. Maybe you have. So these are the subtle and not so subtle reasons why I love this stuff. But what I noticed was about 3 or 4 years ago, I started realizing that despite years, decades even, of effort trying to get Agile to work properly, it was quite encumbered as a concept. And so it worked well in some situations and not in others. So in true consulting style, I've knocked up my 2x2 matrix, trying to encapsulate that idea. And I thought, I think I can see 4 types of implementation of Agile. You guys may have similar ways of thinking about this. I think we see native Agile in startups, for example, organizations that have always been Agile and had that Agile mentality from day one, top left. Top right, we see organizations, few and far between, unfortunately, who've effected a really good transformation. Maybe a mid-sized organization that's quite open-minded, or a large organization that's had a lot of money thrown at it, but has been modest about its ambitions, perhaps. And then underneath, you see these 2 less healthy models. So I'm calling them sidelined and compromised. Sidelined is where Agile has really just been pushed away. People have tried it, people have maybe adopted parts of it, and the rest has just been pushed away. The really good stuff has just gone off to the side. The political battle for Agile has been lost effectively, and waterfall has won, or something else has won, perhaps. And I see the compromised model probably even more often, where I think over-engineering is the word that then springs to mind. So Agile, the idea of Agile has been taken. There's been huge executive enthusiasm probably at some point in the past, and it's been adopted quite badly. Probably there's been a bastardization of hybrid and waterfall. Probably a lot of the pitfalls in the book that I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute have been fallen into. And if you fall into enough of those pitfalls, you really lose any sense that you have an Agile implementation at all, to my mind. So what I hoped to do with the book was try to make people recognize if they were in one of those two pink areas and try to show them a way to get to one of the two blue areas at the top. And apologies for the palette. It's the palette from the book. So I'm just using it for everything now because it's quite convenient for me to do that. So I think, why has this happened? There's a lot of reasons. There's politics. There's the inevitable threat to some of the roles that don't really exist in Agile or shouldn't, which means that people in those roles today tend to resist, obviously, normal change management. There's a lack of understanding often as well. I went for 3 or 4 years probably working in Agile without realizing that at its heart it's a mindset. I probably said yeah when people said that to me, and and then I installed Jira. I didn't realize what I should have realized, which is it doesn't really matter what tools you're using, what processes you're following. It's the way you think about your work, and that's what really matters, of course. And I think probably everyone on that call understands that already. You're way ahead of where I was at that time. And moreover, there's this just legacy of decades of what some people call management X. I don't know if people have come across that term. I'm going to make sure I've got the chat open actually, so I can see if people chime in on this stuff. But management X is traditional management that was thought about decades ago in the times of Ford, for example, industrialization, where the underlying thesis was people don't want to work. They work because they have to. They work because they need the money. Not going to enjoy their work. You have to measure them. You have to motivate them with money and promotions and power, and they're not going to enjoy it, but they're going to do it because you've done that. Whereas what we're aiming for now is management Y. We really want to create an environment where people are enjoying their work and they want to do it on its own merits, and being paid is a bonus. But we're not there yet, and so we still see a lot of these compromise models. So I was a bit frustrated. I felt I knew Agile by this point, and I thought, why doesn't everyone else get it? So I'd seen quite a few books out there written as what I call business novels. And the Phoenix Project is the obvious example. Quite a lot of you will have read that, I think. It masquerades as a piece of fiction, but it's really trying to make some very serious points about DevOps. One big point in particular about prioritization and bottlenecks. And I'd seen several of the books. There's one called The Bottom Line about management accounting. There are a few by my publisher, actually, about IT strategy and about enterprise architecture, for those who are interested. One's called Fruition, another one's called Recreation. People may have read those too. But they're written as novels with characters as a vehicle to bring forward serious points, learning points. So I love that style. I thought I'd adopt that, and I thought I'd start writing. So I started last June, just over a year ago. In July, I was right in the throes of it, and by August, I'd finished it because it was all just there in I was saying to Saf earlier, it's all just there in my head, queuing up, desperate to get out. And by the time I finished the book, I realized I had about, I think I'll come onto this later, but I had about 80 things that I'd been burning to say to people, but didn't really have a platform to say all of them. So this book was that platform. And I've crammed as much into there as I reasonably could. There'll be 100 other things you ought to know, but I don't know those, so I can't help with those things. But the 78 I knew are all in the book. So please do, if you want to learn more than we go into today, please go and get a copy. Hopefully it's worth it. I'm quite a modest person, but I like the book. I think it's worth reading. I feel quite bad saying that, but I do think it's worth reading. So hopefully you get more from that even than you will today. So the problem with writing fiction is you have to have some characters all of a sudden. And you haven't quite gleaned this when you start writing, but you very quickly realize you need characters. So these are the characters in the book. They're introduced very slowly. You get to know who they are. The one top left is Vanessa. She's the Chief Digital and Information Officer at Ridgemore University. And she's the one whose eyes we look through the most, although we look through other people's eyes as well. And she gets into a situation where she's being asked why digital isn't performing and why Agile isn't working, and she has to go and work that out as a non-expert. So we see this journey through her eyes in about 16 chapters of how on earth do I grapple with this? How do I need to think about this to make this work better? Anyway, I'm not going to praise you the whole book. But in the course of the book, over just a 3-week elapsed period in Vanessa's life, we get these 78 learnings, 19 chapters. There are some major themes that come up. I think there are probably about 10 or 12, 13 major themes, major areas where we fall down on Agile. And we drop from that blue area to the pink area. And I wanted to just zoom in on 5 of those today, because I wasn't sure we had time for too much more than that, particularly if we want some healthy discussion around each of them. But I picked 5 that hopefully resonate and that I have very pronounced opinions on. I'm very happy, again, I said this to Seth earlier, very happy to be contradicted, because I can think of at least one of these themes where my opinion might be quite controversial. So I'd love to hear your opinions, because I don't want to be in a position where I don't think I'm learning. I think I am still learning about this stuff. So I'd like to hear your views today. I bet a lot of you on this call are thinking very hard about this stuff already. So if there are any opening thoughts now, then great. Otherwise, let's go into these 5 themes and see what we make of them. Okay, I'm going to go on. So, theme number 1. Oh, I thought Seth was putting his hand up. He's putting his thumb up instead. Very different. Good. Okay, so theme number 1, I think probably the most fundamental for me is ownership. Because if I look at a household name organization in the UK today, aside from perhaps financial services, if I look at a big organization, you can all think of one that you've heard of, you may work for it. And if I look into the way they do Agile today, I expect that there are gaps and overlaps in the ownership of the Agile outcomes, the digital outcomes there. They may not be digital, but they're going to be Agile. So obviously, product ownership is the core concept in Scrum. I think it works brilliantly when it's applied simply. Too much of the time, I think we muddy it. We have extra layers of ownership. We decide we're going to have a lead product owner and a chief product owner, and it gets very confusing who owns what. We put a business analyst in there, and we call them a product owner, and then we have someone else who owns the product. These are all classic things, and some frameworks allow them and even encourage them. But I think they can all complicate things if we're not precise about what we mean. We also often have a team like marketing, maybe, owning a product and owning the product owners organizationally. And then we look at digital, which might have an entirely different reporting line for the outcome. And to me, that doesn't make sense either. You have to create a tight team around a product. The digital team, the product developers have to feel the spirit of ownership for the product, and they have to feel close to the product owner, whoever is actually the product owner, whatever title they might have. So we allow these gaps and overlaps a lot. We have dotted lines and we have ambiguities, and we say, well, you own that, but you don't really own this. We get into messes with things like security and privacy and law. And we say, well, maybe the product owner doesn't own those things. Maybe the chief procurement officer owns them, or the CISO owns those. And then you've immediately got this tension where the CISO wants all of the security flaws fixed immediately. And nobody quite knows where to go with it. And all those things are explored in the book as well. So we need to, Agile is evolutionary and it should evolve, but we should be precise about what is owned where. Otherwise, it's a recipe for inaction, almost, as people look to each other to get things done. And this certainly happened in the book, in the early chapters of the book, and it had to be worked through. Incidentally, when we leave the residue of traditional management around, we make it very, very easy for product owners to be overruled in their ownership of the product. We allow all sorts of people to try and pull rank on the product owner. And without saying too much, one of my recent former employers was great at this, because they ran a family-owned company. So the product owners would own the product, but the company owners would feel very, very comfortable explaining how they knew a lot more than the product owners about their products, and telling them that whatever they had conceived for their products that they'd spent 3 months strategizing about was now wrong. And I can see why they did that, but it's not helpful. You may as well not have a product owner in that situation. So
we've got our first hand up. I don't know if it's a nice
my mini lecture on that topic.
Yeah.
But David's first. He's got his hand.
Yeah.
Hi,
On you go, David.
Jeremy. I've got a question, right? This is a genuine question to someone like you who's been looking a lot at this. Let me just introduce myself. I'm a senior business analyst. I'm also author of a thing called Business Value Maximisation Framework, which I've been working on since the 1980s and 1990s due to the astounding amount of failure I saw back then, which rather shocked me, and it ain't a lot better now. But here, when we say product owner, what do you think we mean by product? What do you think that word means?
Right. How do I do this briefly? I've written handbooks on how to define a product, how to bound it as well. I think a product. So product. It's a difficult term, isn't it? There are so many bits of language in IT and digital that trip us up because they've been used for other things already, and product is one of them, of course. So you've got the legacy of product in marketing teams where they've had product managers for years who think they manage the product, and now Scrum comes along and says there's a product owner as well. To me, I've always defined the product as a collection of stuff that creates value for some defined set of personas. So it is pretty much as simple as that. And then what you put into that product, how you bound it, depends to an extent on the organization. And there are multiple sensible ways of doing it. I have an opinion that says you want your product team to be pretty autonomous. So if it requires multiple technology components, I like putting those technology components inside the bound of the product so that the control and the prioritization is all happening with all the necessary technology components and all the necessary skills to create more value next week and the week after. Other people might define a product differently. They might be optimizing for different things. So you might say, well, we're going to have a different concept of a product here. We're going to have a product which is a time slice down a user journey. So that's reasonably common as well. And I see that especially in the public sector, where people will say, well, I'm going to claim benefits or something like that from the DWP. Registering to claim benefits is a product. And really, that's just part of a journey. That doesn't give the user, the benefits claimant, anything that they would value particularly. It's time sliced down the left-hand side of the journey. So I prefer bounding a product such that it can create value iteratively. To me, that's very important. And so that it's the right size for a product owner to actually own without whole layers of nested products. Does that answer the question, David, or does it? It may not. I'm very aware of that.
Partially, but I'll tell you why. But I'm known as a bit of a maverick in the industry, and I question everything. But
yeah, good.
what I agree with there is when you said value. The thing that concerns me is that there are a lot of good things that came in with Agile and a lot of bad things, and product tends to imply to too many people it's software. And as long as we roll out lots of nice software out the door, we're going to get more value in our organizations. And there's a heck of a lot more to it than that. If product means an end result of the combination of optimal software functionality, change, business process, blah, 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 then that's good. But I think many people in Agile don't see it that way. And you know, what I say is you need someone in that room. If you're doing all this development, you need somebody in that room that can do that translation process between business and IT, and just not that old-fashioned business IT bipolar thing, but what are the layers that produce value and all those intermediate languages. And I really commend some of the reasons why Agile was brought in and understand it, but the way it has rolled out, which of course is where you are now an expert, it's not been entirely helpful. But
agreed. Yeah. No, agreed. And I mean, I would prefer to bound the product so that it has all of the. I used the word componentry, I think earlier, or components. They're not necessarily just technical. They might be people, they might be processes, they might be documents. It's whatever creates that value. It might be the packaging, the color of the packaging of something equally. Yeah. In fact, Sat said earlier, I'm an advisory consultant by day. I tend to deliver my advisory consulting pieces of work, not projects, but pieces of work, as though they were products. So if I'm doing something like a target operating model for an organization, I will fashion that as the product temporarily, because I find it lets me iterate on the operating model. So it might be a slide deck, as my products often are, rather than just a piece of software. It could be anything, absolutely anything. I agree with you on that.
Thanks.
Okay. Should we cover any other questions there? I'm not sure if we've got any, South, or should we move on to the next one?
But nothing else came up. There's a comment, Stephen, that's just arrived as I looked away, which is normally what happens. Says that the same issue as people thinking like, project
Yes,
just deliver
absolutely.
software. Yeah. So this is something that we're going to get on to. So we can come back to that. But yeah, just to David's point. So
yeah, okay.
I've been in digital product for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And that does go well beyond software, but really the product thinking comes from the fact that you clearly identify some kind of consumer of your product. And that could mean it could be anything. So the mindset tends to typically shift. But I think it's a good opening question, I think, David. So thank you for that.
It's a whole art form to me, defining what the product should be optimally. Because I think there are certain things it has to be, and there are other things it's desirable for it to be. So I that's a whole separate debate for me, and we could almost run an hours-long session on that.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, I'm popping characters onto these slides where they pertain to the theme of the slide. It's not Olivia's fault in the book that there's an ownership failure in the book, but she is the obvious figurehead for that issue. So I'll let you pursue that by yourselves if you want to explore. Okay, next slide. So the second one that I chose to pick out was, I'm calling it agile masking. You may not recognize the term, but you'll mostly recognize the issue. Most of you, I think. This has been going on for a very long time. Ever since agile really came into vogue, which is probably 20 years ago now, certainly 15 years ago, people have aspired to say that they are agile without necessarily going through the transformation that requires. So we saw very early on people would grab Jira, for example, and say they are agile. Or they'd start stand-ups. I mean, stand-ups are incredibly popular now, as are retrospectives. And we're almost at the point where retrospective is the standard language for a lessons learned session, because it's a slightly more fashionable term, makes people sound a bit more agile, doesn't necessarily mean they are at all. So I call this agile masking, and it's picking up some of the facets of agile or the rituals of agile without necessarily having changed the way you think about the work or the underlying, or ownership even, any of these other things that are far more fundamental to agile. So I do various sessions on agile in various contexts, but one of the things I say is agile it's a mindset, and it involves things like psychological safety, good communication, and real-time collaboration, and fearlessness, all sorts of concepts like that, which are far more fundamental. But we do still see quite a lot of those organizations in the bottom right of the diagram I showed earlier on, doing a lot of the things that Agile says you should do without having changed the way they think about it. And one of the concerns for me is there are now, I saw something a couple of years ago, somebody had counted up all the possible Agile frameworks, including the base methods and all the frameworks that cluster them together. And there were more than 40 acronyms for modes of Agile, methods of Agile, ranging from XP to SAFe to Scrum to everything, LESS and DOD and everything else. A huge number of them. And I think that the weight of method that now surrounds Agile tends to make us think it's about method rather than about mindset. So I don't know if those of you here have had that experience, thought about that, agree, disagree. But I think this is a major problem, because if you go into an organization trying to affect change and everybody says, well, we're already agile, you've got to take time overcoming that obstacle first.
Reese, I knew you'd want to come in here.
Oh yeah, because this is my life. Because I was around when Agile first came in, before it was Agile, rapid application development.
Mm-hmm.
And the transition that we've seen is that people always wanted to stick a method on it because it was easier. But the difference with Agile is it's an umbrella term. There's these different things that you choose as the organization that's implementing Agile to plug together in the way that you want to do it and what's best for your organization. And when it really works, people shift. But when it doesn't work, They basically do what they've always done, but just relabel it.
Yeah.
So, and there's a very good Craig Larman video somewhere that actually explains all of this, that I've seen somebody turn that into an exercise to show people, and people are always really shocked when they see it and they think, oh, this is how we work. But it's because people naturally look for the thing that they're used to doing in the new paradigm. And they don't understand that sometimes it's not there.
That's right. Yeah, and for good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. People find unfamiliar really, really hard.
Yeah, I think it's a massive change effort, by the way. If you're still in agile in waterfall world and you want to go agile, it shouldn't be underestimated. It's a huge thing. Requiring people to think differently about the way they work is a massive thing. It's hard to think of a more substantial type of change. So we shouldn't underestimate the change required. Some people take to it naturally because it's the way they want to work or the way they naturally work. For others, it's going to be a massive uphill struggle, and it's going to threaten their existence in their job. Yeah. AI aside, it threatens people's roles. Yeah. Okay, agreed. Yeah. Any other? So, Louise, can I ask how do you tend to overcome that?
A lot of time, a lot of time working with people, because fundamentally, the longer I work with Agile, the more I think it's about people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like all the other things, it's in a way, it's just noise. And you end up with the tool that you end up with. But if people don't fundamentally shift their thinking, then the tool is just going to replicate what they had before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you just have to spend a lot of time with people and help them believe that their world will be better if they work in a different way.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, and I like to think that for most people that's true, but I guess for some people it isn't, because in fact the next theme is going to touch on this anyway.
Yeah, because they've been successful doing what they did before. That's the thing, and that's hard for them to understand, that maybe being successful in the future is not what they've done before.
Yeah.
Especially when there are still jobs that will pay them lots of money to do that.
Yeah. Okay, I noticed Laura's just come in with something as well.
Yeah, so Laura's just talking about her experience as an analyst, and it's a very good point, something I think many of us have seen. And the management sometimes don't tend to really have the patience or time. I guess the context would be important to bring people along on the change journey. I think a lot of us have seen that. So I think that's a good call out. Very, very valid point. Something I've certainly seen, and I suspect many others on the call have seen it as well.
Yeah, it's typically we seem to underestimate change. I'm trying to remember what I read recently. It might have been a Craig Larman book, actually. I'm just trying to remember, a Baz Vod book, but it talked about how you should really be budgeting as much effort on the change management as you do on all the rest of an agile transformation, if not more. So it's putting the tools in place, putting the process in place, reorganizing the people is probably half or less of the overall effort you need to put into an agile transformation. And most of us, of course, are still in some form of agile transformation, whatever quadrant we're in. Maybe not the natives, but almost everybody else probably still is. Okay, and I see a comment from Andrew as well. Getting people, yeah, there's a specific chat that resonates with me. Andrew McMaster is saying that it can be very difficult to get people to realize that they should take work rather than be given work. They're still expecting to have tasks issued to them rather than taking something off the board. And that's certainly challenging. Yeah, for me, that goes along with a few other things that are really unintuitive to people adopting Agile. It's things like, for example, there may not be a project, there may not be a project manager, there may not be a weekly report. We might be showing the customer things that aren't very polished or finished yet, and the work never ends. There are a whole lot of things that just confound people who are very bought into the waterfall method, and all of those things need to be absorbed and understood, really, for the best outcomes. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'll go on to the next one then, Seth, shall I? So theme 3, we've just touched on this actually, but I see this absolutely everywhere. I'm just trying to think of any large or established organization where I haven't seen this fight play out to an extent. And it ends in lots of different ways. But most technology organizations, most technology departments, irrespective of the industry, tend to have portfolios of programs and projects, and they tend to have created a project management office or a program management office or a portfolio. In fact, my wife runs one of these, so I know all about it. And those offices tend to be built on top of the project construct, if I can express it that way. So they tend to think in terms of business cases, ad hoc pieces of work, end dates, milestones, fixed objectives, capitalization against those fixed objectives as well. And all of those things really play against the idea that we can go faster than we expected to, or go slower for very good reasons, or deliver different things. And that's the true spirit of Agile, of course. We should be able to feel our way through things and do whatever's the next best thing. Thinking strategically, but adapting to the environment we find ourselves in and to the changing business conditions around us. For my money, and this is the one that might be controversial, everybody, in case you haven't spotted that already, for my money, a project gets in the way of all of that. Because when people see the word project, they expect a fixed budget, a fixed timescale, and fixed outcomes. And all of those really get in the way of doing the right thing in a context that's uncertain. However, oh, I'm sorry, somebody was trying. Oh, maybe they weren't trying to come in. However, so if the PMO team is in place, it's been built on those project constructs, it wants to scrutinize the portfolio of work in project terms. It will ask questions like, what's the start date? What's the end date? What are you delivering? Why can't you tell me what you're delivering? And can I have my weekly report, please? And why aren't the costs on the weekly report? Well, they're not there because the costs are the same every week. You're paying for this team and it has those costs and they're all OPEX. So do you really need to know what we spent this week? And if we didn't deliver anything this week, that's fine because, and no, we haven't ticked off those tasks because we didn't do those tasks because they weren't germane to the outcome we were looking for this week because it changed. But PMO teams tend not to understand that, and they tend to want to present all change work, particularly within an IT or digital team, as one thing. And project is their default mode for thinking about that. So often Agile teams end up trying to crowbar what they're doing into a project-esque concept just for the purpose of your reporting so that the work looks neat alongside a project portfolio. And it compromises the work of an Agile team. And in fact, when they do that, progress is very hard to, it's very hard to look at a project report for an Agile product and make sense of it and see that it's doing what it should do. So it compromises outcomes. It brings unwelcome scrutiny with the wrong context behind it as well. So I would go so far as to say, South, as I said to you a couple of days ago, I don't think if we are working Agile and we have a defined product, I don't think there should be a project. I would say let's not have a project at all. I don't think it's helpful. Let's get rid of the project. Let's get rid of any programs, ideally. Let's have a product and products around it, and a family of products. Let's not have a project, not have a program, ideally. Let's not have a project manager sitting there alongside a scrum master and a product owner, complicating the world. Let's not have an end date. Let's not fix the outcomes. And let's put the work into convincing the people around us, CFOs and people like that, that that's the best way to get the best value for the organization, which I've seen done. I've been a part of doing it, and you can make it work. But I'm not saying it's easy. So, discuss. I expect debate. Does anybody have strong views on that one?
I'll chip in on this one because we've chatted about it before, and yeah, I think it's still a real heavy debate in many organisations and in industry, especially organisations that are trying to move to a more of a sort of product operating model, where they really want to create autonomous product teams and empower them to essentially work effectively on a product and focus on outcomes rather than outputs per se. But the fundamental thing here typically still tends to centre around funding models
Mm,
and programs and projects get funded. Though I think I'd probably flip it slightly on its head in terms of the thinking, because the key point here is projects come and go, as we know, because they have a defined start and end point, which is the very definition of a project. But you could have several projects that run throughout the duration of the life cycle of a product. So I think the key point for me is that the products last longer than projects. And projects will run within whatever funding cycles are typical in an organisation.
Do you know, I think it tends to be understood. So I was working with an organisation just a few months ago, and they were very project centric, but they had these things called application owners, because they may not have realised it, but they had large, cumbersome, big applications with lots of custom development that did need constant attention. And so they'd have an application owner with a team of 4 or 5 people, and they would have an amount of budget, which was effectively OPEX, to just do good stuff. But they didn't call it a product, and they didn't declare themselves separate from project management, but they had that need anyway. So I think people find ways around it. But the truth is, if we have a big, complex application that's creating value and could create more value, elements of product management just come in. And it's better really if we accept that they are product management and we gear ourselves around that, and we adopt some of the conventions of product management, for me, rather than having to fire up little projects all the time, or pretend to, or try and do everything in OPEX, which is probably too constrained for development. Yeah. Okay, I can see a comment from Andrew, but I think it relates probably to the last point, so I might not suggest we go backwards.
I've got another comment. One of the things I've seen, because I came to Agile through the route of business analyst, project manager, and Scrum Master, and the interesting thing about Scrum and the Scrum Master position, quite often the Scrum Master is seen as a project manager. And he's definitely not. And then also there's an element where is the product manager a project manager as well, which this is an external view that we often get challenges from businesses on. So that was my point really. So.
No, couldn't agree more. I think in the early days of Agile adoption, somebody always says, well, who's the project manager? Is it the product owner or is it the Scrum Master? And if it's neither of those, then we need a project manager. Because people don't know really how to look beyond that. And this is, back to Louise's point earlier on, it's such a fundamental change. You know, the idea of not having a project manager to somebody who's managed projects all their life is going to be very challenging, triggering perhaps.
You don't have a project manager because you don't have a project.
Yeah. That's right. It's as simple as that, isn't it? Yeah. That seems quite intuitively obvious to me. Yes. But a lot of people wouldn't see it that way because project manager is code for the person who manages delivery, irrespective of whether there's a project. I think a lot of people would expect one anyway. Yeah. Louise's. Yeah.
No, it's just, I just wanted to say, Andrew, the thing is that I remember being phoned up and asked who gets in trouble when things go wrong when you're Agile, and I said, oh, it's the team because it's a team responsibility. And the response came back, no, who really gets in trouble? And that's because if you've got a project manager, that's the person you sack.
So you need one throat to choke.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that people find very hard, is that there isn't this one single person that they can blame. You know, wherever your project manager comes from, whether they're internal, they're from a vendor, whoever it is, you just don't have that one person to blame. And it's really hard to say, right, okay, let's sack the whole team, because it's, you know, you would then lose all your development capability and the rest of it. And that's one of the reasons why people still quite like projects.
Wouldn't it be nice though if people were asking, who should we reward when it goes really well?
Exactly. You would think, but what they tend to do is, if it's like external products, they reward salespeople.
Yeah. I mean, for my mate, I do have an answer to that. Oh, sorry. Oh, Seth is, yeah. I do have an answer to it. I think if the buck has to stop somewhere, I think that is shifting to the product owner. For me, they own the product. And I think of the product ownership role as much as possible, you want your product to be like a mini business with a relative amount of autonomy. And you want your measures as a product owner to be real financial measures that are relevant to the wider business. You know, how much revenue, how much profitability, how regulatory compliance, yes or no. You want them to reflect the objectives of the wider business on a smaller scale. And you want to have the levers to pull to be able to influence those things. And therefore, the buck does stop with you. Now, there might be some shared ownership, and that's why under theme 1 earlier, I was very keen that we define how ownership works. So there might be a head of digital, or a Scrum Master might have picked up some level of responsibility, despite our intentions to stick to purist Scrum. But if so, then be clear what those other accountabilities are and make sure they don't clash. Take care to make sure there are no gaps or overlaps. But the product owner is the default owner of whatever happens with the product. It gets a lot more complicated if the product depends on 6 other products, or it depends on platforms, which are kind of run as products and kind of not run as products, all of which is quite common. But I try and guard against some of those things. That's why I try and make the product as self-contained as possible. Sometimes that flies in the face of efficiency because it makes it hard to have shared components. And so that's where some of the art of scoping the product comes in. How are we going to scope it? For efficiency or for speed or for what? Yeah, but product owner for me anyway, Louise, that's just my view. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, yes. So Louise is saying product should own the risk for the product. Yeah, product owner, I think. Yeah. Okay. Can I move on, Seth? 2 more to do. Yeah. Okay, right. Just 2 more. Next one. Again, might be quite controversial. Hope so. Now I can say all this because I was an architect for 10 years. So I can say the things I'm about to say. I think architecture is incredibly difficult these days. There's a characterization of architecture in the Ridgemore book, which actually I borrowed from another book. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It's a book by Gerben Vierde called, I think it's called Chess and the Art of Enterprise Architecture. But I've reprised that view of architecture in the Ridgemore book. And that view is, it is incredibly difficult now to do the 5-year future view of the enterprise because things change too much. You know, even before AI, again, it was very hard to say this is what the enterprise will look like in 5 years. Things were moving at much too fast a pace. And it's also very difficult to say now, alongside Agile development, well, okay, we'll review that in 2 weeks, and then we'll review it again in 3 months, and then you can release it in 6 months subject to X, Y, and Z. Because things are moving 10 times that fast. So architecture is really, oh, and the other thing, sorry, is what is architecture? So the book comes up with a theory on what is architecture. And it's all about things that are hard to change. It's the pillars holding up the building. As everything is now cloud, and as we have DevOps, there is less that's rigid in our software in particular than there used to be. Far more is far more flexible than it used to be. So what is architecture? I think it's shrinking. The architecture in a solution is shrinking, and it is more about the enterprise and the standards than individual solution architectures. So architecture is having a tough time of it. The traditional way of thinking about architecture, just like the traditional way of thinking about the project portfolio, is a real problem for Agile because it retards Agile. It's going to slow down Agile, and it's going to create real clashes. We have Agile teams, product teams wanting to deliver value every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week, and everything that architecture will default to doing is going to slow that down. So architects really have to rethink who they are and what they do alongside significant Agile development. So again, in the book, there's a prescription for what that might look like. But if the architects have the right mindset, they can accept that challenge rather than just opposing Agile development. Far too many organizations, in my experience, the architects really don't want to play with Agile, and they do it begrudgingly, and they do it by not really bending at all, by saying, look, this is how we work, why won't the developers fit in with that? Or by making some small concessions that don't really act in the spirit of Agile. Things like, for example, okay, we'll call an ad hoc architecture review board to look at your latest iteration. We can do it in a couple of days. It's not really in the spirit of Agile. It's not attempting to move at the pace of Agile. it's almost like saying to the developers they're wrong. And as I say, I can say all this because I was an architect for 10 years and a chief architect, and I remember what it was like, and I see now how unfit that way of thinking about architecture is in any sort of agile context. It's very waterfall, it's very rigid, it's too rigid, it's more rigid than our solutions or than our businesses want to be. So luckily, Pedro, on the left-hand side there, he gets all that, he works out what to do, and he gets well on his way to encouraging some of his peers to sorting that out as well. I won't go into the pages and pages of detail behind that, but there are ways to adapt to it. It's not actually that easy, but there are ways to adapt to it. And I think it's probably needs to be the architects who lead that rather than the developers trying to trying to adapt to the way the architects work. Stereotyping quite dramatically there. Anyone got any particular experiences of overcoming this problem? Or has it not been a problem in your organization? Oh, everybody's incredibly quiet on that one. That's interesting. Is that what you expected, Tab?
So
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether you dislocate anyone who'd be particularly opinion, but Andrew, I think, wants to come in.
yeah, just a quick point. Quite often I've worked. We've been developing a product. We've then come to the release stage of the functionality, and the architects have come in and gone, oh, sorry, that doesn't align with our business model, and go back and rethink it.
Yeah.
So they are way behind the curve in terms of the speed of the agile delivery.
Yeah. And I can see Louise has her hand up, but can I just ask a follow-on question with that, Andrew? What happened? Did that cause the architects to realise then that they were outpaced and change what they did, or was it just back to the drawing board?
So with them, without sounding really bitter and twisted, the architects go, no, it's failed our enterprise architecture board. You're not going to release this. Go away. It's all your fault. So
I found myself wondering if those standards were available when the development started, because they're not always. Sometimes they're after the fact and they're still enforced.
a lot of them are still in the architect's head whilst you're doing the development.
That happens too. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you see, I have literally been told once prior to a product increment going live, oh, that doesn't comply with our principles. And you say, where are they? And they're not written down. Yeah, but nonetheless, we're meant to comply with them. And nobody ever remembers being told about them either. So it's almost as though they didn't exist, but surely that wasn't true.
But do you not get issued with the crystal ball when you start?
I've got a huge amount of time and respect for architects, but they have to learn to fit with agile, and that's not always happening. That's my concern here. Yeah.
But and don't get me wrong, they do a really valid job in maintaining standards and keeping the business going in the right direction. But sometimes it's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I've seen it work, by the way, so it can be made to work, and the book tries to illustrate how that might happen. Louise, we should give you a chance to come in as well.
Well, no, I found it very interesting what you're saying about architecture, because I've worked under strong central architecture, and I'm working currently in which people probably hiss now, a safe ecosystem, but our architects are like nowhere to be found. So, and we're supposed to have a system architect at PI planning, and the only thing that we can find are the enterprise architects, and they're busy doing things with the business, and doing useful things. They're finding out things that we don't always know about. But it would just be nice if they would turn up to PI planning so that people could find out what's going on in their heads. So
yeah, it'd be super helpful. Yeah, and it may just be that there's nobody. I mean, it has been relatively difficult to hire good architects in recent years, obviously. So there may be a shortage. It may just be a shortage, or it may be that they can't schedule their work around those PI events. I suppose. I don't know. Don't know your organisation, of course, but yeah, interesting. Sometimes there's no architect to be seen. Other times you've got too much attention. Yeah, I guess that's true. Oh, Saf.
Just before we move on, I was just listening to what Louise was talking about there, and I guess this is still the fundamental issue many of us face when you're trying to achieve the right outcome and you're really focused on doing that, and you need alignment from all the key players. Everybody's got to be involved, right? As soon as anybody's excluded, probably, not necessarily intentionally, just got missed off, they're not part of a planning exercise like Louise is describing there. That's when you then get further down the line what you were describing. Somebody come along and go, well, we weren't consulted, we weren't involved, so they feel like they can block you and say, well, but those things also need to be agreed in the ways of working, right? So when you set out to do what you're doing, you want to be aligned on, well, here's the delivery model we're going to adopt, and these are the people who need to be involved, which to me is, again, it's what you were saying earlier, it's common sense to many of us, but there's still a lot of struggles culturally to see this stuff embedding well in organisations. But if the architects are nowhere to be found, or nobody knows where they are, or they're busy doing something else, or they've not got time for PI planning, that's naturally going to have an implication, right?
You may have already done this, Louise, but what I've done before is I've tried to imagine the conversation between the development team and the architects, or the product owner and the architects, and I've mapped out the kinds of inputs they should expect to get from each other on what timescale, and the kinds of governance they can impose on each other as well, and have them both agree to it. In fact, I've workshopped it with them both together, and actually you find the objectives they both have tend to be the same, broadly speaking, and if you can map out how they can interact. The mapping out is easy, it helps, but it doesn't fix the downstream problems, because you still get people not turning up, because we're all ridiculously busy for whatever reason these days, and so people just don't turn up when they always should. But it can help just to map out what the interaction should be between two roles, particularly with the product team and the people around them. And the same goes for people like the security and privacy officers, and governance and risk managers, and all the sorts of people who will want to influence the backlog and the way that the work is done. Can we help just to paint that picture of who says what to whom and how and with what authority?
I think Andrew's got his hand up again. We'll maybe hear from Andrew, and then you can move for
Yeah,
your final
sorry,
theme.
I seem to be taking over from Jeremy.
That's okay. That's fine. Yeah.
So if I completely get Louise's point of people not turning up for PI planning sessions. The whole point of the PI planning is to have all of the relevant people in the room to say, right, this is the way that we're going forward for the next period. And if people are not turning up regularly, then it's down to senior management then to just start putting the pressure on them to just keep turning up, because if you do get to the situation like I've seen previously, where we're developing a product and then we get told, no, you can't release it because it doesn't fit with our overall IT sort of IT roadmap, then we're just wasting the company's money.
Yeah, agreed. I'd hesitate to pull rank, because it never helps with the sort of agile spirit across the team.
No,
there may be occasions where you have to do that, and certainly make it known that the system isn't working.
It's a last resort.
Yeah,
an escalation is always a last resort, isn't it?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, thanks for the input, Andrew. That's good. Take over anytime you like. That's fine. I'd welcome the break. It's been a long day. One more theme to go into. And there are more in the book, of course, but these are the ones that I thought were worth pulling out today. So the last one is probably very obvious to lots of people. Louise was making a knowing face then, I think, if that's what I thought it was. The HR, the corporate HR, central HR department, and the HR business partner closest to you probably embodying this as well. So what I tend to find is that to hire and retain in the market we're in, you may be paying people who aren't managers more than managers are being paid in other departments. You almost certainly are, for very good developers, team leaders, or even just senior developers. And there can be a lot of pushback from a lot of established HR departments. So they'll tend to say, well, there are remuneration caps because this person is at this band level and therefore they can only earn this much. They'll say things like, well, to earn that much, you have to manage 5 people or 50 people. They'll say things like, well, we're going to define a career path for you, or you're going to help us define a career path. And it requires you to go from junior developer to senior developer to managing developer to whatever. And again, it's taking you up the management chain that you may or may not want to be on. You may want to go from Scrum Master to Agile Coach or something else, Product Owner or whatever. And you may not have that flexibility because, again, Management X presumes that you want organizational seniority and money, and that those are the 2 things most likely to drive you. And bonuses and a few other things, working conditions as well, which are relevant. But actually what you might want might be a collaborative spirit around you, the opportunity to learn new technologies, and the opportunity to be coached by somebody who knows something you don't about the industry you're in, just to pick a few things at random. So sometimes, quite often, we can be constrained by HR as well, and finance as well, and we touched on that earlier on. Lots of the organization, lots of departments, the established functions around IT or digital. But this one is difficult because I don't know, in my experience, it's been easier to influence finance than it has HR. Other people will have different experiences, of course. But HR tend to be relatively rigid in a lot of the organizations I've worked on. And they don't seem to understand that the motivations for people in product land might be very different for the motivations elsewhere. And if we're going to attract people and retain them and try and have a sizable cohort of in-house staff, which I would recommend, rather than just relying on contractors or external service providers, then we've got to be able to get these people and hang on to them and keep them happy in their careers in a different way. So over to you guys again. Is this something you've experienced? I don't have a recipe. Even in the book, we don't really present a recipe for getting around this one. So I'm interested in exploring it with the people on this call. Have you had this problem, and have you found some great ways around it?
No. Basically, where I currently work, we have a lot of people that have just one person reporting to people. So we have lots of single managers because the rule is that to be at a particular level or whatever, you have to have, at least one reportee, which is completely ridiculous. It makes no sense. And I came from an organization where I was management grade, but I was allowed to be an individual contributor.
Yeah.
So, but this problem has been around for a really, really long time, because I remember I used to work for a vendor, and the technical people, like the ones that have been there, got the hat and rest of it. I remember one of our managers, the resource manager for the region, was complaining that the top technical person got paid more than he did.
Yeah.
But that guy had known, had been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt, got a sticker rock, got everything. And and they was who they wheeled out to customers for like large quantities of money to solve them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why is managing somebody more valuable and more scarce than being that somebody and doing your job in a very expert way? To me, it's not at all. I've never understood that personally. I don't see any reason why people below me organizationally. I mean, a hierarchy, an organizational hierarchy is just a construct to get things done, right? So there's no particular reason why somebody below me shouldn't be paid more if that's what the market commands. I presumably wanted to be that manager. Presumably I didn't just do it for money. Presumably I did it because I wanted to be a manager. Maybe I didn't, I don't know. But if the market demands, if doing the right thing and getting the right outcomes for the organization demands me to pay more to somebody beneath me on the org chart, then fine, by me. But of course, a lot of people wouldn't think that way. And I don't think it's the people though. I think it's more the rules, the inbuilt rules in the organization that say no to that sort of thing. I mean, there are still, I don't know if this is still true, but central government used to be a problem area here. I don't know if any of you work in central government, but there are fixed grades in central government, and there's a strong expectation, which I think they've started to break down a little bit now with the modern DDAT functions, or digital and data functions that they have in central government. But there was a strong expectation for a very long time that you had to manage to be at a certain grade and to get access to a certain pay band. But it's not just government, actually. It's any very well established conservative with a small c organization seems to suffer from this problem. and it is quite destructive to Agile.
I
You
think
end
there's
up wheeling in contractors and service providers who aren't really as bought into your goals as your employees might be expected to be.
It's also quite destructive to people, because people think that they need to go up to a management grade and need to manage, but they may be completely unsuited
Yeah.
to managing people because it's a different skill set.
Yeah.
You know,
So
and
they might hate it, and they might be very bad at it as well, which knocks onto other people, of course, as well. Yeah. Agreed.
yeah, I was just
Anyone
gonna
else? Oh, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, in our organisation, they've just tried to help structure all the roles, and they've brought out individual contributor and management roles with the idea of giving product owners a route to go without managing people, only to find that I'm put in a product management bucket, even though I'm doing product management and product owner roles, and I can only progress by managing people. So it's quite bizarre how they do it. So we always end up meeting a plateau where you can only manage people to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Even though they've only just restructured it all to try and make it a bit more flexible. And it is going to restrict the Agile process that we have.
Yeah, which is quite regressive. You know, I said in one of the earliest times, 26 years Agile's been around. It's been extremely well established for, let's say, 15. And this stuff has always flown in the face of it, and still we're not managing to evolve beyond it. Technology-centric organizations, tech industry providers, for example, seem to have got around this, no problem. I don't see why the rest of the private sector couldn't make that transition as well. I get that it might be a bit harder in public sector, I guess. Although, you know, public sector arguably has got further with this than some private sector segments have. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. This is the one where I wish I had more answers. There are some suggestions about what to do in the book. Typically, it gets down to nuts and bolts about, well, if we don't overcome some of these artificial barriers, what are we going to do instead? And demonstrating that what we do instead is worse for the organization. But you may have to go through that the hard way by actually doing it and showing that it was worse. So there are some difficult conversations about outsourcing in the book. Luckily, there was a prior experience that the characters could draw on from 2 or 3 years earlier, which showed that it was a really bad idea. And so that was just about enough of an argument to allow some of these boundaries to be permeated. Okay, good. I know we're coming up to time, actually, Sath, because there's been some good, rich conversation around all of that, as we hoped. I'll draw it to a close there, just to say that obviously there is more in the book. I think there's probably something just about for everyone to learn. And moreover, for those of you who are experts on all this stuff already, I think it's probably quite a good thing to put in front of some of the managers who are attached to old style management thinking, because it's quite easy to read and it will help them see perhaps why it might be good to do things a different way and think about work in a different way. It might be good for everybody, in fact. So please do go and read it. Please contact me on the email address there, bottom right, if you've got any questions or suggestions or want to debate anything with me. I'm actively interested in this stuff and I'd love to have offline conversations with whoever about any of this stuff. So please do reach out if that's interesting. I do have a blog as well. I'm not going to big that up too much because I write stuff on there when I want to write stuff on there. It may relate to the book, it may not relate to the book. I'm quite active in AI at the moment, so that's becoming the more dominant theme on the blog at the moment. So I'm not going to, I'll big up the book, but not the blog. How about that? Okay, Sath, I better hand back to you.
Thank you kindly. That was, yeah, really enjoyed that. And I would just say, just before we open up for any more general questions, and then I'll wrap up. I've got the book. I think I showed it earlier. I've read most of it, and I think listening to many of you, you will recognize many of the scenarios. You will recognize the interactions. You will recognize the problems, the challenges, the characters. You'll probably you'll be able to probably. I certainly was able to align them to either other people I'd worked in various organisations, similar views, similar challenges, similar things that they were doing, or also even recognise roles you played yourself. So that all of this stuff came up for me. So I would definitely encourage you to pick up a copy if you want to delve into it more, or as Jeremy said, catch up with his blog, though he wasn't actively promoting his blog.
But please do. But I'm actively promoting my email address, so if people want to talk, then that's delighted to talk about these things and see if I can help anybody.
Excellent. Yeah, really enjoyed that. So well, thanks, Jeremy. That was really good. I enjoyed our conversations leading up to the session as well. So I think the themes that you picked in the end and shared, I think, are common and quite key ones for many of us in the work that we do.
Yeah.
So
Great.
thank you for taking
Okay,
the time
thank
to
you.
share that today.
I'll
We
stop.
do have time for a few questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to wrap it up a little bit earlier and give people time back. But I'd certainly encourage you to take advantage of Jeremy's time here and everyone else as well. I think been a lot of really good contributions made and lots of valuable experiences shared, and I think we've had a really good conversation, which is exactly what many of us try to inspire and encourage in our organisations. So yeah, well done to many of you for your active participation this evening. So any other final things you want to pick up, or anything you wished we'd covered? It could perhaps be a future session, or anything else you'd like me and the committee to be bringing to you all as community members. Happy to take some thoughts here, whatever you want, and then we'll wrap up. Any other questions or thoughts? Except we've stunned everyone into silence now, Jeremy.
I've been left off mic.
It was interesting. I've now gone and bought the book, so I can read more. So thank you, because I find these kinds of books a little bit difficult sometimes. But it was really interesting, because I think a lot of people do have problems with their agile transformations, and most of us are stuck in a partial transformation somewhere. And it's always been one of my complaints that people always assume that you start an agile transformation at the very beginning, and most of us aren't there. We're somewhere else.
Yeah. Certainly not today. Yeah. It frustrates me. It frustrates me just how often people go out and just deliver stuff and don't really care about whether the benefits arise or not.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit the same with the agile transformation. The agile transformation was initially sold because it had benefits X, Y, and Z. People do half, get bored, and then assume that they've got half of the benefits, or maybe all of the benefits. You may have none of the benefits, and you may have gone backwards, in fact. But people tend to abandon the effort at that point and switch onto something else, which is a great shame to my mind.
So I've
Andrew.
got. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Somebody-
Andrew, go ahead. He's got
Oh,
a
yeah,
hand up.
go on.
So.
Is
Let-
that
let
okay? Yeah,
ladies
you
first.
patiently had his hand up.
So I was going to let Amanda go first, but I think just again taking Louise's point and going back to your quadrant diagram at the beginning, I think that most organisations are sat in that compromised segment. And
Depends where you are, but there are a lot of them. A lot of the household names, I think, are stuck there. It's my view.
So I've worked again. I work as a consultant, so I've worked in lots of different organisations, from startups to blue chips, and most of them they think they're agile, but they're far from it. So
yeah, agreed. Yeah, depressing. Anyway. Maybe we can all go out and try and make things better now.
Jeremy, I just remembered something that I forgot to chip in with, but I think since there's quite a few of us still here, probably wrap up. I can't remember which of the themes it was, but you were talking about so when we were talking about the masking, so agile masking, and you used the term ritual, and I had a little nervous shuffle because we try really hard now not to use that term because of its obvious associated connotations, and really we see these things as events because really things should be happening. So I think for a long time the Scrum community has pushed really hard to say like the Scrum events, right? Most of these scenarios. So I'm really quite opposed to using the term ritual, but I forgot to mention that earlier. So just to call that one out before we run out of time. Louise looks like she wants to chip in here as well.
Or ceremony.
Ceremonies.
Yes, exactly.
About it, and I found it very interesting because somebody actually went off and did a deep dive in the history. So I like event. I use event.
Yes, I use event almost universally, because the reason we use event, or we try to use event, is because it is an event, and at an event something happens. So
Yeah.
again, it'll always
I
come
think
into
that's
language
my
and
preferred word. Yeah, I think some
connotations.
people
Yeah.
find ceremony a little bit ridiculous, so I tend to
Yes.
avoid that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Amanda had her hand up before, but she
Yes,
put it
sorry,
down.
Amanda.
Yeah, sorry. All I was going to say was, and I think Louise might, I don't know whether Louise kind of thinks have some experience with this either, but because mentioned PI planning, I kind of would love to find out more about how to make the safe, agile process less waterfall and agile combined. Because it does seem, in our organisation, it does seem to be like, I've got safe, and every 3 months we're going to do PI planning. So we're doing a bit of a waterfall, and then we do a bit of agile in the middle. And then as teams, we're trying to evolve and work very quickly. We end up being agile anyway, but actually we've got to do a bit of a waterfall planning and safe process. And so it does seem to be a waterfall agile thing at the moment, although we have had change management and going out for a whole business transformation to work through safe, but it seems to be just the product and engineering organizations that's working like this, rather than the whole business of marketing and support and the implementation teams and things like that needs to really be involved for that full autonomous team, which I'm still trying to push for to help us be in control ourselves. But that would be something I'd be quite interested to understand, how to make safe less 3-monthly waterfall process.
Sure.
I could obviously chat offline about that,
Yeah.
Amanda, if that's useful. Very happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, if you stalk me on LinkedIn, I'm
Okay.
happy to chat to people.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Louise. Okay.
So I was
No.
I was talking on mute there. Sorry, as one tends to do by the end of a session. No, that was good. I'm just seeing if there's anything else coming up. Yeah, I think we're all just chipping in, and yeah, people are commenting on ceremonies and rituals and whatnot. I'm just reading Stephen's comment there. Rituals, people do manage. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's it. So I remember coaching teams in the past who, I think we would say, they basically go through the motions. So I think for a long time, we talked about things like zombie scrum, where, people literally turn up and, they sort of look like they'd rather be anywhere else. And that's not really what you want to see by, for a motivated team, right? A team is there, they want to be there, they're clear on their goals, they know what they're trying to do, and they're all pulling in the same direction. So yeah, plenty scope, I think, for all of us here to keep learning and making this stuff better. I think would certainly be the takeaway I think many of us can take away tonight. I think for me, and Jeremy, you use the term expert many times. I've been in this in various guises for over a quarter of a century, but I would never ever class myself as an expert, because I think there's so much to learn, and it continues to be an evolving thing. And I think what we're now getting better at is realizing that actually we do have to work hard to get people aligned. And Louise said it earlier, and Louise and I've talked many times about these sorts of things, it is all about the people, and methods and tools and frameworks, etc., should come much later, and it should never be about those things, which is why I think, sadly, we sometimes organizations lost their way a little bit, because for me, a lot of it is inherent in actually being able to live the values. And I don't see that nearly as much as I would like to see that. And I think for me, that's still at the heart of what a lot of this is about, because when you unlock those values and people live by those values, you do actually see better outcomes and results. And when folk forget all about the values, and I think Jeremy and I were talking about it just this morning, they roll out Jira or any other tool of their choice, and they do a few stand-ups and they're like, yes, we're agile. So that's back to the second theme, right? So yes, very good. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I think we're coming up on time, so I'm going to wrap up. If anybody also wants to reach out to myself, or so here, there's only two of us from the committee on this evening, with any suggestions of future sessions you might like us to bring to the community, then please do so. You'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, so it's probably the quickest and easiest way to reach me. If you drop me an email, it might get missed, because I really don't want to live in my inboxes. But do get in touch if you've got any ideas and thoughts. Just before we wrap up, and we will have other things coming up because the committee members and I were all working on a few different things. We're hoping to do a few in-person type events as well, because this year part of our strategy, if any of you joined our AGM session last year, was to just regionalise a bit more and try to move away from, you know, traditional BCS doing things quite London centric. So as chair, I'm really motivated by that. So I've kind of, you know, moved our strategy along a little bit. So we are looking to do things, you know, in different areas of the country. So for look out for that. And also, some of you may have joined. I know, Louise, you were there last year. We are working with the organisers of Kanban Edge to bring you the next instalment of that inaugural conference, which went in very well with our community for 2026. So we've just recently launched that. So do look out for more promotion of that over the coming weeks. And the team and I will start to announce what will be another fantastic lineup of industry thought leaders for you who will gather in BCS London offices in March 2026. It'll come in faster than you think.